One of the things that we talk a lot about is how important it is to keep creativity, curiosity front and center in elementary school as children are learning to read and write and develop socially. So I think sadly your experience is not unique.
And that's really sad to think about, if we expect the next generation to be able to flourish and thrive in creating opportunities and building things to push our society forward, if they don't have the foundation underneath them, it seems like we're headed towards like a glass cliff, right? Kelly, welcome to the show. I'm so incredibly gracious that you're here today with me. It's super cool to be able to talk to an amazing leader like you.
I'm happy to be here.
One of the things that we're going to be talking about today is not only your work as being the president and CEO of Collaborative Classroom, but I want to talk about some of the challenges that you're seeing out in the world of education and early childhood development. I've had a lot of people on the podcast where we talk about why this work is so important. And so before we kind of dive into that, I want to know a little bit more about your origin story. So let's talk about why this work is so important to you and kind of how we got to where we're at here today.
Yeah. So a couple things about me. I started as a second grade teacher up in Northern California in a very rural school up there. But early, when I was growing up, my dad was a high school teacher. So every seventh period, I walked from my elementary school and sat in his seventh period history class and got to kind of observe, the class with the high school kids. And as a very young child, a few things I realized pretty quickly that were the sense of connection and relationship that kids had with each other and with my dad as the teacher in their school, and that learning could be a lot of fun, but it could also be really powerful for what's possible in the world when you kind of own the knowledge yourself.
It's an interesting concept to me because I very transparently was not the best student, right? I never had somebody who inspired me to dive into the endless world that is knowledge. But when I became an entrepreneur when I was 24 years old, I started recognizing that there were so many secrets that were on the other side of books in education. And my only job was to continue to consume information to become the best version of myself. And I wish I would have, had an early experience in life that would have got me on that track a little earlier.
Yeah, no, I think that happens a lot. I mean, even though my dad was a teacher, I always say, I'm the third smartest kid in my family. But I also think that allowed for a lot of creativity and thinking as well. And, for me, school was very social. It was a big part of my social life, and I was a big athlete in school as well. But it did also take me a while to realize how much I loved learning.
Let's talk a little bit about that competitiveness through being an athlete. I'm a lifelong athlete as well. I played baseball in college, and I really started to decide that when I got a little bit older, I was going through a big identity crisis, if you will, where I had a mentor of mine said, Keenan, for so long, you've put so much time and effort into becoming a professional baseball player. One day you're going to have to decide to go pro at something else. And I started developing the skill set to be the best business person that I possibly could. And that's how I translated that competitive nature of sports into the afterworld, if you will, of regular life. How did you kind of use, if you will, your athletic experiences to kind of drive you into different areas?
Yeah, I love that. I think first and foremost, being part of teams when we're growing up and, when we're fortunate to have done that in college as well as the gift that keeps on giving. So one of the things I didn't have the opportunity to go pro in basketball. I kind of missed that boat. I love seeing where it is now. And truth be told, now seeing all these women, I would not be good enough. But they're phenomenal. I love it. But I think one of the things, I talk about this with a lot of my friends who also kind of grew up as athletes or were in the performing arts or had some way that they were really part of community and excelling in different things. One of the things I think is so true that helps in my professional life, and I would imagine with yours, but that sense of teamwork for me is winning. When we're functioning well as a team, that feels like winning to me. When I'm hearing about good things happening in schools and districts because our curriculum is helping teachers, that's winning for us. So I think I still have that competitive spirit very much, but it's definitely guided in a much different way now.
I want to talk a little bit about the work that you guys do at Collaborative Classroom. So what is the big challenge that we're kind of tackling in society today with the work that you guys do?
Yeah, so we very much work in the literacy and social development space. So we have offerings that go from birth all the way up through fifth grade, with some going up into 12th grade. So the majority of our work is in elementary schools. It's in literacy. So as you know, as a country, we're not doing great in literacy. We're also, not doing great in children feeling a real sense of connectedness and connection in school as well. So our work is really geared towards helping teachers build very powerful readers, writers, and thinkers in their classroom, and supporting them with their own professional development as they teach our programs. So that's where we spend all of our time, is how to make the teacher's experience much stronger.
When did you realize that this was a really big challenge that we were dealing with in the education system today and in society in general?
I think as soon as I got into teaching, I knew it. I taught, like I said, in a school that, we were struggling with teaching our children to read, and write and be really powerful thinkers. So very early on, almost 30 years ago now. And I've been working on that ever since.
It's a really interesting priority. In our previous conversation, I mentioned a little bit about the interview that I did with the CEO of World Reader, right? And we were talking about the traditions, the curiosity, and the opportunities to inspire the young people in our communities through reading. But it seems like this is a little bit more of a threat today, especially in this digital consumption world that we live in. Is reading something that people are prioritizing? And maybe why have we gotten so far away from that?
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point. I mean, and I think it goes beyond just even being able to read, but to think critically, to question things that people are reading or hearing is going to become more important in the digital age that we get into. But just in the fundamentals of teaching kids how to read in elementary school, that's still a huge need and priority. I mean, the number of children who are not on grade level by the end of third grade is pretty overwhelming. And all the research shows that if children are not on track by the end of third grade, and some are even saying first, the challenges that children, eventual middle school students, eventual high school students have is pretty overwhelming. And it's something that we can do a lot about. We know a lot about how to teach kids how to read.
I mean, it erodes at your confidence, though. My personal story was in 1997, me and my family moved from Seattle, Washington to a suburb outside of Detroit. And the school that I went to was a small private Lutheran school, 104 kids, grades kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, when I was going through first, second, third grade there, I struggled with reading comprehension. It was really tough for me, but I didn't realize how far behind I was until I went to public school in fourth grade. And I had a really tough time keeping up with all the reading assignments, everything else like that. And it shaped my perspective of education as something that I didn't enjoy because it was so challenging for me. And it really kind of stunted my creativity, my curiosity in learning things because I dreaded going to school every day because I didn't have the fundamentals underneath me.
Yeah. I think that sadly is common in a lot of places. And I also, one of the things that we talk a lot about is how important it is to keep creativity, curiosity front and center in elementary school as children are learning to read and write and develop socially. So I think sadly your experience is not unique.
And that's really sad to think about, if we expect the next generation to be able to flourish and thrive in creating opportunities and building things to push our society forward, if they don't have the foundation underneath them, it seems like we're headed towards like a glass cliff, right? Where we're not going to see the changes that are necessary to push our society forward.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think folks are making a lot of strides. I think that, there's a lot of questioning about how we prepare teachers, how teachers come into the system, how we support teachers once they're in schools and districts. So I think there are a lot of states making efforts. I think there's a lot of school districts making efforts to try to change some of what has happened, for sure.
I want to know a little bit about your guys' model. So when I think about your guys' model from the business perspective, I think about it as like the trainer model. So you're going to equip the person who's in front of the people who they're impacting every single day with the best tools and resources. Let's talk a little bit about what you guys have created.
Yeah. So, just a real quick recap. We started as a research institution for the first 20 years. And we really studied sense of connection, sense of belonging with children. And in the early 2000s, our founder, his name was Eric Schaps, and he said, how do we marry this with literacy? It's the biggest part of a child's day in elementary school. And I really think the pathway here is marrying social development with literacy development through the K-5 years. So that changed our whole organization. So we went from doing a lot of just teacher training, writing professional books, to actually building that daily curriculum that teachers could use. Because one of the things we know is that if teachers just get professional learning and have nothing to use every day, it's not very sticky.
Right.
And also, we can't expect teachers to be making every single lesson for every single day for every single subject that has coherence across the year, coherence across a K-5 career, of a child. So that's the work that we do. So we really provide support to the teachers who are, really serving their children. So we do it through curriculum and really powerful professional learning.
How do we get the curriculum adopted, right, in certain school districts? You guys have a national footprint, right? So what were some of the early days of trying to say, hey, here's a standardized curriculum that we can kind of integrate into the curriculum that's being taught in the classroom? Did you guys run into early roadblocks with trying to get these things adopted?
Yeah, we certainly did. And it's still roadblocks we have today. One of the things that most people don't know, almost every company selling curriculum in the education space is a for-profit company. And at this point, most are owned by private equity. Many are venture backed. We're one of the only nonprofits in this work. So you can imagine, we are a little hindered by the amount of money we can invest at any given time. So we have a very strong ground game. We have an excellent group of educators on the ground that bring our work to schools and districts. We have a great set of professional developers and program developers. We all come from education backgrounds. So we're very unique in this space. I'm really proud of the reach that we have. We support almost 200,000 teachers every day, which is over 3 million students. But it's very small in comparison to the student body that's out there. But I'm pretty proud that as a nonprofit, we can actually support teachers in this way.
Here's a little bit of an interesting question. With so much capital being infused to the space by private equity, venture-backed organizations, do you ever worry about the incentives that might be behind some of the things that they're pushing in the space?
I think it's a valid question, in terms of, what materials look like, what market needs they're trying to meet. For us, we stay rooted in a couple things. What does the evidence say about literacy? And let's stick to that. What do we know about the healthy development of children? Do we have a good understanding of child development? And what do we know about what really supports teachers? And so we kind of stay true to these things. And that keeps us very rooted, keeps us very grounded. And sometimes, sometimes we don't grow in certain markets because of something a big publisher has done. And we just have to be okay with that.
Oh man, that's got to be frustrating though, with the impact that you guys are trying to accomplish here and the clear evidence, right, that's in front of us that we need to do a better job. It must be kind of frustrating to say, some of these large publishers have Texas as an example kind of locked down with all the information that they're putting out there, and it doesn't leave room for improvement, which can be kind of feel like golden handcuffs, I guess.
Yeah, I think it certainly can. Districts do make their own local decisions, and, states certainly sometimes provide guidance. I always tell our team, the way that we're going to continue to grow is help teachers get really good results with their kids and really support them. And I do think it is a long game. It's not a short game. And we've made tons of progress in this, over the years, but we certainly are the little player in a very big sea.
I mean, as the leader, right, at the helm of this ship where you guys are driving this, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've kind of seen as president and CEO of the organization over the last couple of years? Yeah.
I think one of them is certainly, how fast we can develop some of our curriculum. And another one has been how much we can support the number of teachers who are using our curriculum on a daily basis. So as I said, any given day, maybe 200,000 teachers are using our curriculum. We're never going to support 200,000 teachers with humans, giving them professional development. So we've made some pretty big investments in things like asynchronous coaching. We just are getting ready to launch our first AI kind of chat agent that is generative, that is built completely on our own knowledge base. So, for teachers getting into our work, they can come and ask any question, and we've answered these questions hundreds of thousands of times. So we're trying to find ways to support teachers once they get our curriculum, because even with a big publisher, teachers are never going to get enough support, especially early on. So I'm really looking for other ways that we can support folks. And I also think it'll be ways that other places won't invest, right? It's not a big money maker. But for us, it doesn't need to be a money maker. It's really about how do we best support the teachers with our work.
I want to talk a little bit about this AI component, because often when we think about education, we think about healthcare, we think about different spaces, they're often slow to move when it comes to innovation, right? So why was this something that you guys kind of identified as an augmentation to the support that you guys were being able to leverage? What was the strategy behind that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, because I always tell people we are not a tech forward organization. We don't have a bunch of apps for students. We don't have a lot of, kind of cute little things. But, the question I've always asked is, how do we support all of these teachers so that they can be successful and not get frustrated and get that just-in-time support and feel like they're surrounded by a team that's supporting them. So I had been working with a gentleman, his name's Fred Fishback. He runs Javelin Learning, and he's worked in healthcare for the last 30 years in coaching, trainings, supporting palliative care physicians with really hard conversations of how do you coach around that. So he's been a kind of a colleague mentor of mine for a long time, helped with our asynchronous coaching. And he just started to kind of show me a lot of things that were possible using generative AI. And given that we had already spent 4 years answering live chat types of, support, we had this bank of knowledge. So we could tap into that and just build our own kind of tool, just trained on our own content, which I think is really important.
I mean, it's incredibly important. And one thing you probably don't know is this is exactly kind of where the heart of my business lies as well. We work in healthcare, human services to use things like conversational AI, right? That is trained on organizations' data to be able to answer these type of questions. Because I think that if we can look at technology like this with a lens of curiosity, right, we can think about how these tools are not meant to replace, but are meant to accelerate the support that we give to a dispersed team across the nation. And why shouldn't we use technology to be able to handle some of those FAQs, those repetitive type of requests, when our team can come over the top and really provide the value in those higher leverage tasks?
Yeah, I'm so with you. I think, I've been spending a ton of time learning about it and what's possible, and kind of talking with Fred, like the power of domain specific information is never going to be as powerful as it is now. I was just at an event with a kind of young entrepreneur, and he's developed something for college counseling using AI. And one of the things he shared with us is one of the colleges had to add 50 more counselors because actually students got more curious and got more needy around their college experience. So whereas there was a fear of we're all going to lose our jobs, they hadn't ended up having to hire 50 more people because it became so much more important to the students. So
this is an amazing conversation. I was literally just talking with my team. We've been doing something very similar. We created a solution for high school students. One of my personal experience in going to college was I wasn't the best student, right? So I had apprehension about going to my guidance counselor to ask questions about how should I be kind of rounding out my application to be able to apply for school? There was hesitancy that was in that. So it stopped me from having those important conversations. And then eventually I went over a cliff where I just wasn't prepared and I had to scramble to be able to get into school. So I think about these pieces of technology creating opportunities, like you said, for curiosity to eliminate barriers to ask questions, which then will create more opportunities for people to come in and give guidance, which is a really interesting time that we're kind of at in society, where AI can play this role of, I would say, instigator in a good way to get people to think bigger, to put people in the human seat, which is so powerful. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, we're really excited about, we've been doing a ton of testing, obviously, and getting ready to release it this winter to our schools and districts and teachers. And I just think it's going to be a huge value add. And I think it's a great use of the technology. And I always lament to my colleagues, I am not a fan of going to a website and having a chat bot that's very like if then and preset.
Right. 3 responses.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you can click this, this, and this, and it'll lead to the next thing. And so having the power of using kind of, generative AI that I can go back and forth. I can ask for something shorter. I can ask for something more specific. I want a little bit more on this. It's just, I think it's going to be just a really great tool for our educators.
How do you get other people to buy into this vision, right? Because coming from a space like this, often we're not the quickest to innovate. We're often not going to take the risk, right, of saying we're going to develop our solution that's trained on our information and data. Did you ever have any trouble getting people to kind of buy into this vision for what the future of integration of technology was going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we spent the last year showing people different things in my own organization. A year ago, no one really was talking about AI and how we could support teachers with AI, but we just kind of kept, working with Fred and putting different things in front of our team to see what is possible. And I think once people realize what's possible, and then also once we started doing the testing and seeing what the accuracy rates were, that gave us a lot of trust, because the last thing we want to do is be giving out, misinformation, bad information to teachers because of the job that they have of educating young children. Like, we can't get things wrong. So I think it was a lot of bringing people along by, showing them things and getting, yes, buy-in, but also real legitimate examples, that they could see, and also realize like this isn't going to take people's jobs. And what has happened in my organization is now other groups are starting to think, wait a minute, how could I be leveraging some of the aspects of AI in the work that I'm doing? So my sales team, my marketing team, we're starting to look at our website. Like, we have a flat website. How do we get people to come there who are willingly coming, that are curious about things, and engage them a little bit more than we currently are? And then I think there's implications for development and other parts of our organization as well.
What an amazing surprise. This is so cool. I'm so glad to hear that, you're being so curious about these things, because we don't have the ability to rest on our laurels anymore, right? We have to be able to create multiplicative impact and support across our organizations at scale. And I just don't see any type of solutions that are really going to be able to do this at the same level. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, which is a unique, interesting thing about your guys' model, 250,000 teachers means that's a lot of people to engage with remotely, right? So how did we kind of start thinking about scalability? Like you said, a little bit about asynchronous, right? The ability to engage with people. How are you thinking about building the future of this remote organization, which seems like there's a lot of complexities behind it?
Yeah, there are. So right now we're about 130 full-time people and another 100 contractors. When I first came to the organization almost 18 years ago, we were very much, we had a home office and almost everyone worked out of that home office. Today, we're completely spread out. We have full-time people all over the country. We have, executive leadership all around the country. So for us, a few things. One, we've made big investments in a group called the Management Center, and we have a great relationship with them, and then a private consultant as well, to really think about how we manage the whole organization, but try to do it in a very inclusive, sense of belonging kind of way. So that's helped a lot. We started investing about 6.5 years ago. And I think that really helped as we went through the pandemic and went completely remote and have stayed remote, is having that really strong management structure. The other things, we leverage a lot of technology. We leverage a lot of Slack, and so on. I think there'll be a big place for AI in our organization, short term and long term as well. But we tend to attract educators that want to work here. Educators tend to always, they want to work in places where they belong, have a sense of connectedness, want to be helping, giving back. So I think we're pretty fortunate in that way, in terms of the type of organization that I'm fortunate enough to run. But it's ongoing. We try to find ways to get teams together. We all got together last year, but of course, getting together every year is quite expensive in a big organization. So we can't do it as much as we want, but we try to take advantage of, times that we're all going to be seeing each other in different parts of the country, doing the work.
I'm really interested. I had a conversation with a leader from an organization in Wisconsin, and she said that one of their core values that they changed once they went into this digital hybrid world was the little things. They said we build culture on the little things, the little interactions, the ability to engage with each other, lift each other up, give kudos, acknowledgement throughout the organization, which is a really interesting thing about going from a place where you have an office where everybody shows up every single day. We have those opportunities to engage and interact with each other, to lift each other up, have those one-off conversations. But in this digital world, it is quite isolating, right? So we have to do all of the little things to think about how we can engage, uplift, and encourage each other, even if it means just sending a simple message or a thumbs up on a message like that. Has that been a little bit of a challenge for you as you kind of navigated this space?
Yeah, it's such a good point to bring up. We started using Slack right when we all went remote, which has been really helpful because you kind of can use some of the little emojis for a little bit of feedback. We're actually just getting ready to bring kudos into our organization. We use something called Culture Amp, and our HR director, our VP, Maria Ross, has been really instrumental in kind of pushing us into let's get a little more formalized about this, because to your point, all these little things are really important because people are doing great, amazing work every day. And we want to find little ways to acknowledge it. I think it makes a big difference in how people feel about a place that they work and being recognized by their colleagues as well.
I have an interesting question about, the journey in which you've come along. So started off as a second grade teacher, right? Now we're the president and CEO of an organization that's reaching thousands, hundreds of thousands, literally people every single day, which is amazing. How has your development in leadership kind of been? Because being a second grade teacher often doesn't embed the skill set that we need to be able to encourage and cast a vision for people to believe in. How has that been?
Yeah. So since I left being a second grade teacher, I had a lot of experiences. In my mid-20s, I went to work for an organization based out of San Francisco that was doing a lot of professional learning around literacy, and they had great leadership. I'm still really close with folks from there today. So very early on in my career, I got some really great training. I also continued to go to school. So I finished my master's in administration. I got my doctorate in education leadership, and really, and kept working in nonprofit organizations, but nonprofit organizations that generated revenue, that didn't just live on foundation dollars. So I was very fortunate both with the schooling that I had and kind of the cadre I was part of in my doctoral program. We're all really close. A lot of us are running big organizations right now, but we had some great support and work in there. And then I've been really blessed with a lot of great mentors. So from my kind of first role out of teaching all the way to the other 3 organizations I worked in, had really strong people that kind of, supported me and also taught me things that I didn't yet know. So, and I tell people all the time that are in education, there's a lot of work in education happening, that if you continue to build your skill set and your relationships with people, there's a lot of opportunities to do really, really good work.
Here's a question for you. Nonprofit CEO burnout is a huge problem, right? And one of the things that I've been able to kind of tap into through my intuition, having so many of these conversations, is often we have a really tough time staying grounded in how long this mission is going to take to accomplish, right? When we get our goals right, they're a good finish line, a check mark, or a destination. But when we get them wrong, they're a horizon. We take one step towards them and moves one step further away. How have you stayed grounded in what you guys have accomplished and made sure that those goals didn't turn into those horizons that are always just out of grasp?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about this, Keelan, because my organization's been around for almost 45 years. And I think 25 years ago, people in the organization could have never imagined that we're impacting almost 3.5 million kids every day, right? Yeah. And for me, I'm like, we're still only impacting 3.5 million kids. So we still have so much work to do. But I think a couple things in terms of kind of managing for the present and managing kind of for the future. One is we have a really strong board. I tell everyone I have the best board in America. I'll go toe to toe with anybody who wants to bring it to the table about the folks that they have. And this board, not only are they just strong in their own kind of knowledge, some of them are really strong business leaders, subject matter experts, researchers. They've also known the organization for a long time, and they have grown with the organization as well. So things that we were talking about 10, 15 years ago are very different than what we're talking about now. However, the heart of what we care about, kind of deep social development, connectedness, deep literacy, is the same. How we do it is going to shift over time. So I'm in current conversations right now, like how do we build the organization for 2035? Because it's going to be very different than what we built for 2015. So right. I think having the people around you that can be in these conversations, that can help, both guide, give input is really important for a nonprofit leader. And so that's something that's real here, is really strong board, great executive team, really strong staff that can look at the now, but also think about the future.
Let's talk about that vision that you're casting for the future, because we have a lot of leaders here, right, who have been incredibly seasoned, but we also have a lot of young leaders who listen to the show as well. So when it comes to casting a vision, right, for 2035, like we're talking about 10 years, 11 years down the road, what kind of things are you prioritizing? What kind of things are you betting on?
Yeah, I am betting completely on teacher success. What can we do to be making sure that whatever we create, teachers are really successful with, because they're the ones teaching their kids. So if we can equip them with really powerful curriculum, strong professional learning that makes their jobs a lot easier in the work they're trying to do with their kids, that's what we're going to do. How we do that, we've only ever, in the beginning, we only had print curriculum. For a long time, we only had professional books. Now we have a lot of this AI technology to support the teachers. So I think constantly looking at what's going to be supporting the teachers. We're going to have a lot of teachers leaving the profession. I think in the next few years through retirements, we're going to get a lot of new teachers. So what are they going to need to be successful? But that's kind of what we really look at, is what can we do to really equip those teachers.
Yeah, I think about that next generation of teachers who are coming into this space. On the podcast, I had an amazing guy on here. His name was Frederick Martin, and he's from a healthcare institution, University of Kentucky Health. And he said, one of the things that we have to do in preparing our students for the future is align what our businesses look like from a resources perspective. You're going to have a whole generation of people who are coming out who are used to engaging with iPads, generative AI, ChatGPT, are going to be a part of their everyday life. And so if our organizations are not ready to say, here are the resources that can help you do your job effectively, we understand what your needs and wants and expectations are, it's going to be difficult to meet that next generation, right, with the tools that they need to be successful and have the impact that they envision.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And I think, back to the earlier part of our conversation, I think curiosity and creativity are going to be key. I really do. I think, really not having a growth mindset or not being open to new ways to do things is going to be the downfall of a lot of organizations. And so that's something I'm trying to instill in our own organization of, the what we're doing, I think, is going to stay the same. We're focused on literacy, want to help with, healthy development of children. How we do those things is probably going to look pretty different in 2035.
If we could go back in time to a younger version of Kelly when she was just getting started in this organization, right? And she's going to be navigating the future, what piece of advice would you give to her as she kind of goes on the next 5-10 years of her career?
Yeah. I think a big one is, find some people who can really support you. And I don't mean support you of go along with everything that you say, but really support you of also people who can give you really critical feedback. And also find some of your first followers. When I first got into more leadership positions in the organization I am now, I was pretty young in the organization. I wasn't on the old side by any means. But one of my first followers was key. It was someone who had a lot of kind of social capital in the organization, and really, said, I'm going to do everything I can to support you to be successful. And I'm also going to let you know when I think things aren't going right. So I think having some of those friends is really important. The other thing I think is really important for young leaders is have a broad network. I tell everyone in my organization all the time, you should have a lot of friends that are in the same industry that don't work here. Even though they might be competitors, if we're all on the same side of the fence of we're all trying to help kids build really strong reading literate lives, because that literacy is freedom, then have some friends. I'm friends with almost every CEO in our space, and we share pretty openly about things that we're doing, because I want the whole sector to get better. So I think that that's a really key thing too. I think sometimes, especially young leaders, can feel a little scarcity mindset of like, ooh, I don't think I should be talking to them and giving that information away. And I'm the opposite. It's like abundance. The more abundant we are, I think more things will come back to you.
Such a tough thing to lean into, though, right? We're taught through so many of the systems that we've been reinforced with that there's only a certain amount to go around for everybody. But when you can lean in to that abundance mindset, more opportunity comes. Because, I mean, if we think about the impact that we're trying to create here, right? This is not for one organization to gobble up a lion's share. We're talking about impacting the next generation. And I believe that we are stronger together in business. So if we can share best practices and we can all be impactful, the impact that we're going to have on society as a whole is so much greater.
I feel the same way. And I think especially for folks who are working in our space around literacy and what happens when kids don't get a strong literacy background of all of, what their future lives look like. I don't know how we can't all be working together to try to make the whole sector better.
What else is on the front of your mind, Kelly? What else should we be talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot around early childhood needs to get talked about a lot more. We just brought in a really wonderful nonprofit into ours last year called Seeds. And I think we need to be giving more attention to early learning. We have, obviously we still have a lot of work to do with children who were young in the pandemic and how they're doing in school, but attending to really, really young children and supporting families and educators in those spaces, I think needs to get a lot more airtime.
Why do you say that?
Well, think about what happens when children are birth to 5 years old, all the development that happens, all of the language, all the social interactions. It is the setup for everything in life. And so I think if we can be looking at kind of the workforce there, supporting them, supporting families in that way, then these children, by the time they get to kindergarten, will be in a much better place.
And I think this is a multi-front attack, right? This can't be just the responsibility of the education system, but there also has to be a little bit of accountability that comes into the family, right? Into the home as well, because it does take a village to raise a child. And I think that we do need to have more of these conversations because it's not just a one person responsibility. Very transparently, one of the biggest aha moments I had during the pandemic was when I heard so many parents being upset about how difficult it was to teach, entertain, and keep their children attentive towards the things that were important during the daytime when they weren't in school. And naturally, a little alarm bell went off in my head to think about, do we not now realize how incremental our teachers are in influencing and building and molding the next generation of great minds? I feel like we need to give these individuals so much more credit for the incredible role that they play in society.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I have a lot of friends that are teachers. Yeah, it's a huge job. And I think anything that we can do both with pay, support, everything, class size, we definitely need to be talking about a lot more.
I mean, especially if we think about, I was listening to a podcast the other day where an ex-executive from Facebook was talking about the impact of artificial intelligence in the world, right? And he's painted a big picture for the future. He said, imagine very similar, right, to when we were younger. We always used to be told you need to learn how to balance a checkbook, right? And then all of a sudden, online banking apps became something that was real. We no longer write checks, but we have a phone that instantaneously tells us what our balance in our checking account is, right? Think about the same thing in the future of artificial intelligence. When we have children who are coming up that have on-tap tools like generative AI and conversational tools that they can get resources and answers from, the teachers in our society are going to be one of the highest ranking influencers that we see because they're going to be teaching our children how to think about problems. And that is a huge thing that we have to recognize that's just around the corner.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. I think I think the curiosity building, I think the creativeness that's going to happen, the really critical thinking, the questioning of things is going to become bigger because knowledge is going to be, it's going to be easier to access that, in terms of what's the answer to something, but being able to discern is going to be more important than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one of the traditions that we have here on the podcast, Kelly, as we kind of put the landing gear down is our guest before wanted to ask you a blind question.
I love
Now,
it.
this is a really interesting one. What was the best lesson you learned from the worst leader you had?
Ooh. I have to say, I haven't had a lot of bad leaders. So I don't actually have a good answer for this because I haven't experienced a really horrible leader.
Let's put a little bit of context around this thing. So part of what the conversation was about from our previous guest was, sometimes we learn by seeing what other people do that we do not want to repeat. Have you ever had an example of somebody doing something that showed you, oh, now I know how to not handle that situation? And that was imprinted on you to how you kind of handled that situation in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, while I've had some really strong leaders, I've certainly had some that are, a little more abrasive than I would ever go about doing things. So it's not in my nature. It wouldn't be my thing, but seeing how others respond to that kind of way certainly was, imprinted on me pretty young. But like I said, it wouldn't have been in my nature, but it's something of, it doesn't bode well for teamwork and trust and relationship.
Well, Kelly, let's talk a little bit let's use the last couple of minutes here to give you the opportunity to take the floor and, do a micro commercial for Collaborative Classroom. Talk about where we can find more information about the mission, the impact, everything that you guys are doing. Where can we find you if we want to follow along with your personal story? What's going on?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find us at collaborativeclassroom.org. You can, of course, find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. I think most importantly, though, if you have listeners that are really interested, we work in every single state. And so we're working in schools and districts in every state. So if anyone is curious and wants to talk to folks in their own community, I can certainly matchmake in that way as well. I think it's really important for, anybody listening to this podcast to really inquire about how are my kids being taught to read? What is the, kind of the sense of connection feel like for my kids in these schools? How do I know it? I'm always a fan of asking some good questions.
Well, Kelly, you are definitely the definition of heart and hustle. It's been an amazing time having you on the show, and thank you for blessing us with your presence here. It's been absolutely amazing.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you're doing. I loved hearing about your story as well.
I appreciate it, guys. We'll catch you in the next one. That's a wrap.